Welcome back to my 3D anime character series. Previously I showed the process of modelling the face and the eyes, and in this video I'll explain my approach to setting up the UV map so we can apply textures. So without any more delays, let's get stuck in. You will notice I have a few red lines set up on the face so far. These are referred to as seams. These will allow us to unwrap the mesh to create a texture map. To make a seam, enter edit mode and press 2 for edge mode, then select the edges you wish to mark as seams. Right click and select mark seam, and to remove a seam, select clear instead. If you cannot see these edges, press the viewport overlays at the top right while in edit mode and make sure seams is highlighted. How you go about this is really based on your needs. A lot of what you see here will be work in progress, but I will show the full UV map at the end and break everything down. Seamed off regions can be selected quickly by hovering over and pressing L and choosing the seam option at the bottom left. Before we can unwrap though, we need to open the UV editor. By hovering over the corner like this, the cursor turns into a cross, allowing us to drag out a new window. In the top left corner, select UV Editor. With your cursor in the 3D viewport and your selection highlighted, pressing U will open the UV options. The most common way would be simply select Unwrap. This will create an island over in the UV Editor. As you can see, the UV is kind of stretched out and at a weird angle. Like most functions in Blender, a menu will appear at the bottom left, so experiment a little. At the moment, the model still has a subsurface and mirror modifier applied, so only half the face mesh is appearing. You can apply these modifiers before you unwrap, but as you can see, the resulting UVs still aren't ideal. I'll be working with half the mesh and flipping over the mirrored side once I'm done, so I want the central line of the face to be perfectly straight. There are a few ways I can approach this. I can take the unwrap I have here and use a variety of tools to shape it in the UV editor. While hovering over the UV editor and pressing T, we open the tool menu. For the most part, the UV editor functions just like when we're working with 3D. Shortcuts like G to grab, S to scale and R to rotate all function the same. You can also press X or Y after any of these inputs to limit your action to either axis. Proportional editing can also be turned on with O, and scrolling the mouse wheel will change the area of influence. Outside general transform, you also have grab, pinch and relax, which works similar to sculpting tools. I find relax can be especially useful when you have heavily adjusted an island and need to smooth everything out. To straighten an edge, you have a few options. The obvious one is to select and press S, X and 0 to scale along the X axis. However, you can simply highlight, right-click and press Align X. If you're using Blender 4.0, this has been renamed to Align Vertical. You can also use Auto Align, which works in context with your selection. Another useful process found in the UV menu is Maximize Stretch. Simply adjust the iterations and blend value and it will even out the quads of the current selection while retaining the edge bounds. Now, manual adjustment can be time consuming, but at times it is required. However, for the face, there is another unwrap method that I prefer to use. That is, project from view. Align the camera by using the numpad or clicking the corresponding axis on the gizmo here, then simply press U and select it from the menu. This will create a new island based on the projection in the viewport. The downside to this method is some quads will be overlapping or will not have enough space allocated to them. Areas like the mouth, for example, will have to be adjusted manually. For me, I actually unwrap the inner part of the lips into a separate selection to make it a little easier. Maximize Stretch can also be used to even everything out, fixing some of the quads that lack surface space. Lastly, since this is only half the face, I want to place it roughly at the halfway point so I can flip it over later once we've applied the mirror modifier. Once in place, select the edge, make sure the edges are all aligned and press N and then set the X value to 0.5. At times you might want to expand a UV island without having to unwrap it again, causing you to start from scratch. One method is to unwrap the new area and connect it manually by using vertex snapping. You can access this here, and you can either press the magnet or hold Control while grabbing your selection. This is how I did it here. However, there is a much easier method. Select your island and press P. This will pin the selected verts in place. Now whenever you unwrap this part of the mesh, these UVs will remain the same. So it is a case of pinning your islands in place, then selecting it alongside the new faces and then hitting unwrap to move them into place. Note that this only works with basic unwrap, as the project from view will override everything selected. I'm going to fast forward a little here to explain a process known as vectorizing. Since I'll be using a cel shader, a lot of the sections will be blocked out with a single colour and not really have a lot of texture to them. This means the spaces in which our islands occupy can vary a lot based on their needs, whereas with traditional modelling, often we would want to allocate UV space evenly. Since the face and eyes will require the most texture detail, they'll take up most of the space on the sheet, while areas like the neck and scalp can take up a lot less space. Using the knife tool, I cut into the mesh to mark a hairline. These lines require the crease value to be set to 1 to ensure they remain consistent with a subsurface modifier on. Doing something like this results in very ugly typology, so I try to keep it as neat as I can. Doing this with a diffuse shader would result in some very ugly shading, but because I will be reworking the normals for our cel shading, a lot of this artifacting won't be visible. Now I mentioned vectorizing. The scalp will be placed in a section of the map that consists of a block colour. Here is a better example of the technique. This black line and shading have been cut into the mesh itself, with their UVs occupying a blocked out section. You could just draw these details straight onto your texture, however, you will get pixelated edges, where this method will allow you to work with low resolution textures or retaining ultra sharp detail. I will talk more about other vector techniques at the end, but for now, let's export our UV layout so we can create our texture. Select everything with A, and in the UV drop-down, select Export UV Layout. This will open a save menu. On the right, there are a few options you can adjust. Typically I leave the format as PNG. As for the size, 1024 is fine, but generally I like to double it to 2048. You can also set it to 496 for 4K textures as well. It all depends on your needs. Working at high resolution gives you more options to downscale later on, but as your texture gets more complicated, it'll probably take longer to export, so keep that in mind. To create your textures, you could use a program like Substance Painter, but such programs have a monthly cost. Luckily, creating textures for this kind of model is relatively simplistic, so I'll be using a free Photoshop alternative called GIMP. But just use the program you're most comfortable with. I should mention that Blender does have some painting tools included, allowing you to directly paint on your mesh. However, it is very basic and lacks many of the features of other bitmap programs, so I only recommend it for simple processes. Open your UV image in your desired program, duplicate it to a new layer and flip it to give you the full layout. Then it's just a case of blocking out the colours you want for each area. I do my colours on individual layers so I can adjust their tones a lot easier later on. I won't go into too much detail here, as a lot of the techniques I covered in my reference video are repeated here. Once you've made the adjustments to the texture, hide the UV layer and export it. For games, the DDS format is common, but often you'll need a plugin for it, so I suggest exporting as PNG for now. I also suggest giving the file name a suffix, such as base colour, so you know what it's for. To get the texture to appear on our model, we need to assign a material first. You can do this by clicking here, hitting the plus, and then new. I won't be talking about shaders here, as I think it warrants its own video. So just set this to principled BSDF, then press the yellow button by base color and select image texture. Then it's just a case of assigning your texture. To make it appear in the 3D view, you just need to change the viewport mode to material. Now each time you modify the image, you need to click the reload option under the image menu on the UV editor to reflect the changes. Once your UV layout is done and you're in a position where you've applied your mirror modifier, you'll need to flip them over. First, you'll need to select half the face in the 3D view. There are a few ways you can do this. You can mark a seam along the central edge and use link select, or you can enter wireframe mode and box select the faces with B. Make sure UV sync option is unselected at the top. This option has a few quirks to it. Having it on allows you to select faces on the UV map, having them reflect in the 3D view. Having it off has the opposite effect. We only want to see the UVs we have selected in the 3D port, so it needs to be off. Next is to set up our 2D cursor. Press N and select View. Set the location to 0.5 on the X-axis. Then click this drop down here and set it to 2D cursor. This will make our transform origin follow the 2D cursor. So if we select all the islands with A and then press S and -1, we'll flip them over. This is my final UV map and texture. At the center is the face. This line above is the inner lip. To the side are the parts that make up the eye, which I showed in the previous video. At the bottom we have the scalp, side of the face, and a shaded part for the underside of the neck and the back of the ear. The most important parts to note are the eyebrows and the inner ear sections. Earlier I mentioned vectorizing. The eyebrow is split down the middle and flattened out into these two shapes. On the texture I have dark areas for outlines, where I drag the UVs into to create these sharp edges. You'll see compared to drawing this manually, these lines are crisp with this technique. Where this shines the most is when you square your UV islands out, like I've done with the inner ear. Luckily for us, Blender has a function to square out our islands at the click of a button. First is to unwrap the section normally. In this case, I have an intersecting seam to make sure I can square out the section properly. Within the island, pick a quad and align the edges so it is a rectangle. Then press L while hovering over it to select the entire island. The quad should be highlighted white to let us know it is the active face of the selection. Then right click and press Follow Active Quads, and boom. Now if you border UV with another colour, you can drag out the verts to make the outline appear how you want. At times you'll find the line isn't how you expect it. This is down to how the triangles are aligned within the quad. You can adjust this by cutting the quad with the knife tool from corner to corner, then press X and dissolve edges to return it to a quad. There are a lot of other ways you can utilise this technique that I may cover in future videos, but for now, I think that covers it for UV mapping. If you want to know about shading, materials and outlines, I'll be covering that in the next video, so you can always subscribe for more. If you found the video helpful, be sure to leave a like and a comment, as it helps getting videos like this out to more people. Thank you to my patrons who support me. If you wish to become a member, the link is in the description. I also release all my videos there a week early. And considering you've made it this far, you'll probably be interested in seeing how I construct the eyes. You can do that by clicking here. And if you want to do none of that, would you kindly bugger off?
Maybe.